My name is Tom Dietterich, and I am, my background was in computer science and machine learning, and I have also been involved in publishing as an executive editor of a journal, then led a revolt against Kluwer, and we created an open access journal, the Journal of Machine Learning Research, which was very successful, but the Machine Learning Journal, which is now a Springer, continues to be successful. So there's enough high quality work out there for more than one journal. But my role, the reason I'm here today is because I'm the chair of the computer science section of Archive, which, although a latecomer to Archive, is now the largest of the sections. And hopefully that's not all just because of AI things. You know, some of you may have heard of this term from Microsoft, that you should eat your own dog food, which is the principle that folks at Microsoft need to use the Microsoft tools to do everything. And that's what we're doing at Archive. We have been the enablers of this AI revolution, and now we're having to eat the dog food that results from it. But I wanted to I just added this slide to address some of the questions that came up in the first session about how we might use large language models, in a sense, to replace our existing software. So I'm accustomed to the idea that people are using LLMs to write software, but it's interesting that at Archive, the LLM could just be the software, right? Just by prompting it, it could do all the things that right now we're using a lot of ad hoc tools to do. So what are those ad hoc things? Well, given a new PDF, we want to answer a set of queries against that PDF and present the answers to those queries then to the moderators who make the decision about whether to release the paper or not. And so here are some of the things that we currently do with a variety of handcrafted, regular expressions and keyword matching for things like, does this paper look like it was actually a class project? Or was this, is this a review article or a summary? Is this a position paper, an editorial? Is this an extended abstract for a doctoral consortium or a demonstration? These are all categories of articles we basically do not release. And then we also want to know, well, what categories, Archive is divided into these category areas, which ones are plausible as primary categories, and we have a classifier that does that uses some modern machine learning techniques. So all of that, I think, could be done with LLMs. For some things right now, we have to rely on the moderators to open up the PDF file and scan through it and try to find the information themselves. So in particular, in computer science, the standard article makes some kind of a claim. Algorithm A is better than B, or this takes only polynomial time, or whatever. And then there's some evidence presented to support that claim. It could be a proof and so on, a theorem, or it could be experiments. But we require that to be a paper, to be scientific in some sense, it needs to have a claim and evidence. And if we can't find those opening up the paper, then we don't release it. So these are all things that I think the LLM could do quite well and would be a big improvement over and make our moderation process faster. In particular, if a submission doesn't trigger any of these queries, that is, it passes all of these quality checks, then it will be released automatically the same day it was submitted, unless a moderator steps in and puts it on hold for some reason. And so we would love that pathway could become more reliable and moderators wouldn't have to look at those papers at all. There is one downside of that, however, which is that one of the fun aspects of being a moderator is you get to see the interesting papers as they go by. And those are precisely the ones that don't trigger any of these quality problems. And so I think we are going to need to have also ask the LLM each day, recommend 5 papers to this moderator that they will want to look at, just as a reward for finishing their moderation work. Okay, but now the things that I worry about are these 3 challenges, I think, that are posed by artificial intelligence to the broader field. And the first is obviously research integrity, by which I mean, the basic operating principle of machine learning is you teach the system to imitate whoever labeled the data. And so we built this extremely competent imitation engine, but somehow imitating writing scientific papers is not the same as doing science. There are very few domains where it is the same. Writing a proof could actually be a proof. Playing chess, if you simulate playing chess, you are still actually playing chess. But most of the rest of mathematics and science, there's a difference between a simulation and the thing being simulated. So this is inherent in the technology. The second is knowledge assimilation, by which I mean we are starting to see and expect to see order of magnitude increase in the number of papers being produced without an order of magnitude increase in the number of scientists doing the work, just through more efficient automated laboratories, automated mathematics, automated computing, computer science, and so on. When we have that explosion of new results, and let's assume for a moment that they're all good, correct results, and that we've managed to separate out all of the junk, how are we going to deal with that as scientists? In other fields, my wife was in genetics at the beginning of the bioinformatics revolution, and they had a similar explosion there that was just because of all the new tools. And the result was everybody just became more and more narrow in what they do. So is that what we're going to do as a field, and how will we then overcome that? And then the third thing is doing automated science is not free. Someone has to pay for all of this, and particularly if you're consuming reagents and running robots in your laboratory and things like this, it's expensive. I sort of see a key role for human beings in the system is we're essentially the funding agency that decides what science is worth doing and what science is not. So that's my main talk, I guess, but I'll dive down a little bit. I guess I have 5 minutes left, roughly. For research integrity, can we have confidence in the published work? I'm very excited about seeing the formalization of mathematics and automated proof checking. I'm even more excited about the possibility that in software we could produce software that came with a proof of correctness. That would just be fantastic, especially for very important software like operating systems and cryptographic systems and things like this. But is a formal proof sufficient? And there have been just a lot of discussions online lately about, well, you get this formal proof, but it doesn't give you any insight, and there's nothing reusable in the proof that I can take to prove other stuff. And so it seems that we also need to be building new conceptual frameworks that make those proofs factorize into nice reusable components and things like this. And I don't know how we do that, but I don't think LLMs are going to help us in the short term there. And then if we move beyond mathematics, as I say, LLMs are trained to mimic research papers, but they approach it more as a literary genre, right? They do not really have a theory of evidence and how evidence supports hypotheses, no theory of epistemology, right? And so one thing I was wondering about, and I thought the Overleaf talk was interesting today as a way of saying, well, maybe we could capture more of the provenance in articles. So, there's already been some discussion of having digital signatures for things like the experiment plans and execution logs in a self-driving lab kind of setting. But for the data analysis process, I love this idea. A well-run lab should be tracking all of their reagents, and it would be great if, as in commercial laboratories, where everything is barcoded and you have to scan in every reagent as you're doing the experiment. So you know that the right chemicals really went in there, the ones that you claimed you were using. And in computational experiments, maybe we need the Google Cloud to sign the results and say, yes, this is actually the result of running this computation on this computer for this amount of time with these inputs and these outputs, and be able to check that cryptographically. So on the assimilation topic, I already said some of this, but I wonder if there's needs to be a new academic role that's more of the professional scholar person who does not do the actual lab experiments or actual bench mathematics in some sense, but who spends most of their time reading the work of other people and summarizing it and finding linkages between different areas. Because if each individual researcher has to become more and more narrow, how do we then communicate among researchers? Particularly, I think about it in computer science, you often need a whole team with a lot of different kinds of expertise. And it would be these generalists who could help you build that team and say, oh, well, we know there's this sub-area over here in cryptographics that we need, and we need these people who know about data communications, and we need whatever. You put together the pieces of expertise that you need. And maybe we need a whole abstraction hierarchy of such people. The higher you go in the hierarchy, the more it's like being in science communication and less being a scholar. But how do we build an academic system that provides rewards at each of those levels? I mean, traditionally we've had kind of two levels, right? Because they're the people that are writing the deeply technical articles, and then there are people that write the textbooks, who usually are summarizing that work and often reworking the proofs to make them more understandable and so on. But maybe we need more levels there, and maybe AI tools can help us. But I think we also need to think about the incentive structures for what all those different academic roles might have. And then I think for assessing research priorities, if each of us starts to become more like a funding agency and less like a bench scientist, if we're just coordinating a bunch of agents that are doing the actual detailed work, it seems like there are two models. One is very much the current model, which is that you have a project manager role and a team of researchers, and everything is secret and until you publish. And then there's the other role, which we're seeing actually maybe more in mathematics than any part of any other area, where someone says, here's an interesting challenge. Here's a theorem I'm trying to prove, and here's what I've got working, and they got these gaps, and inviting people all over the world to join the team and try to figure out, find a proof. And we've seen some exciting successes along those lines. In computer science, there have been some open challenges that are, for instance, maybe one of the most famous was the Netflix challenge. So Netflix wanted to improve their movie recommendation system, so they made available anonymized, actually insufficiently anonymized data about movie viewing, and they with $1 million prize for the team that could get the best results. And interesting things happened is that small groups initially started working on it, but then they found that they could form more effective solutions by ensembling, combining like hundreds of different submodels. And then they worked out the mathematics of how to do credit assignment, how much each submodel was contributing, and so that they could divide up the $1 million prize in proportion to how much each little sub-team contributed to the overall result. So, so that's an interesting model. DARPA has done this in robotics. They've done it now in cybersecurity, and a few other things like this. The thing I dislike about prize-based open competitions is that you can't really participate unless you have some money of your own. Somebody's got to pay your salary, and you're hoping that you'll get some of the prize money. So I think it kind of works okay in math and computer science because it doesn't cost us a lot to participate. But what if I have to run a wet lab, or I mean, with the robotics one, for the robotics grand challenge, they had to go out and get Volkswagen and whatever Daimler to give $1 million to their team, like the Stanford team that won. Most of the work was done up front, raising the money to be able to build that. So that's a big barrier to entry, and I think for those of us interested in openness, that's not good. So that's all I have to say, I guess.
Thank you.